When I was 7 years old, my mom asked me to deliver something to a neighbor. It was very dark that night and there were no street lights. I could barely see anything. On my way home, I came to a bend in the road with big bushes on both sides when all of a sudden, I heard a loud rustling behind me. When I looked behind me, I saw a tall, dark figure emerging from the bushes. Goosebumps washed over me immediately. In a panic, I started running. I could hear a man's heavy breathing close behind me, and despite how fast I ran, he was gaining on me. I quickly darted to the right and took a shortcut through a hole in a row of tall bushes. I reached the driveway of my house and heard him crash through the bushes too. He was still after me. When I got to the front door, I caught my pinky finger on the screen. I was terrified. I rushed inside and slammed the door shut, locked it, and screamed for my parents. I didn't notice my finger was missing until my mom gave me a big hug. My dad ran out with a gun and tried to find the guy, but he was gone. When my dad came back, he found my finger and put it in a bag of ice to take to the hospital, but they couldn't reattach it. A few months later, in a neighboring town, a boy about my age went missing while walking home late at night. Then another went missing a few months after that. They were never heard from again, and I can't help thinking that if I hadn't been so quick on my feet, I might have suffered the same fate. This happened when I was 15 years old. My mother went out shopping and left me in charge of the house. It was starting to get dark, and I realized my little brother was nowhere to be found. I asked my sister if she knew where he was, and she said he had gone to the park around the corner to play with his football. I told her to watch the house while I was gone and ran off in the direction of the park. When I got there, I was surprised to find the park empty. I called out my brother's name, but there was no answer. A knot formed in my stomach. I began to grow worried. All of a sudden, I heard a faint, muffled noise coming from my left side. I turned just in time to see a tall figure disappearing behind a large fence. I sprinted as fast as I could, and when I came around the other side of the fence, I saw something that almost made me choke in horror. My little brother was being dragged down the alleyway by a tall man. I flew into a rage, and with tears of anger streaming down my face, I ran madly at him. He must have heard me coming because he dropped my younger brother and turned around to face me. He tried to grab me, but I was running towards him so fast that when I slammed into him, I knocked him off his feet. He swore and tried to get back up, but I just started stomping on his face. Without stopping to ask questions, I picked my brother up and ran as fast as I could back to our house. By this time, it was pitch black outside, and thankfully, my mother was home. She was frantic with worry, and when she saw the look on both of our faces, she realized that something bad had happened. As I explained, my brother and I started crying, and my mom gave us a big hug and cried with us. One evening, when I was about 9 years old, I was walking home from school. Usually, I was alone until my mother returned. She worked during the day and generally came home later in the evening. When I got to my house, I took the key out of my pocket to let myself in. But that day was different. As I reached up to put the key in the lock, the door suddenly opened, and my mom was standing right there in her dressing gown. Oddly enough, instead of greeting me, she looked straight past me and in a stern voice demanded, "Who are you?" I turned around just in time to see a man in a trench coat hurrying back down the park and taking off down the street. The fact that my mom was sick that day and stayed home from work probably saved me from some terrible fate. When I was about 13, my girlfriend and I were walking home from the library during summer break. We reached the crossroads where we would part, her house being a few blocks down one side of the road and mine about 3 blocks in the opposite direction. As we stood talking for a moment before we could part ways, a red 60s style car pulled up at the corner, and a very attractive young blonde man in his 20s asked if we knew the location of Church Street, From where we were standing at the corner, you could clearly tell that the street was only about 20 feet on the other side of the main road, so this question was odd. Furthermore, Church Street was only 1 block long, was a one-way, and only had a large church and approximately 4 houses on it. I couldn't help but wonder what he needed on Church Street. My girlfriend and I simply pointed to Church Street and said, "It's right there." The gentleman then introduced himself and tried to initiate conversation. He was articulate, attractive, and charming, but I couldn't figure out why he was talking to us. It was getting awkward and creepy, but he wouldn't stop. He made jokes, asked us about what we were doing, and if we knew where to get a soda. He complimented my long, wavy auburn hair and explained that he was a hairstylist and that he would like to cut my hair for free and also use me in a modeling show. He then asked me to go with him and get some paperwork so he could share some more information. He offered to buy us sodas and drive us home since it was hot. After saying no many times in many ways and trying not to give him any real information, he finally began to drive slowly down Church Street. My girlfriend and I got suspicious about his motives and next plans, so we began to run towards her house. Deep inside, I wanted to get to my house as quickly as possible, and I remember thinking that if he went around the block, he would come up to me again, alone. So I decided to take a slight detour and go down the same Church Street he had taken. It was a very dangerous move, since it was a less busy and almost lonely street, but I figured that at least he could not turn around on the one-way street, and if he did, I would see him coming. I cut through the church complex and eventually made it home, where I told my dad what happened. The police came and took a report and also talked to my friend. They mentioned that a gentleman who matched the car and physical description we had given had attempted to speak with another girl on the other side of town a few days prior. I never found out more information or heard anything else about him, but that shook me for a long time. When I was 12 years old and new to social media, I received a friend request from one of my classmates at school on Facebook. We started chatting over Instant Messenger. It happened that he knew so much about me already, and this somehow excited me the most. As we chatted, he explained that he had been sick for a couple of days and asked me to bring him some books that he would need for homework. Gullibly, I agreed to take the notebooks over to his place. I was on my way to his house later that evening when I passed a car parked on the street and the driver's door opened. A man got out and introduced himself as my classmate's father. He asked me to get into his car and that he would drive me to my friend's house. I was a bit skeptical and refused the offer, but he insisted. When he saw that I was firm in my response, he grabbed my hand and tried to force me into the car. A struggle started between us, and I knew it wouldn't take long before I was overpowered. I began to scream, and the neighbors came out to see what was going on. The man rushed back into the car and drove away while I stood there trembling in shock. I was in such a panic that I forgot to take his license plate number. It later turned out that the Facebook profile had been fake. The man had monitored and followed me meticulously until he knew everything about me. He knew where I lived, where I went to school, and which of my classmates had not been at school that day.